What's good, y'all? BeatGenerals.com back with a brand new tutorial. This week we actually did beat reviews, but out of the 20, I believe it was 23 or 25 people, something like that, that submitted for the actual beat reviews, only 2 people ended up wanting a public review and one changed his mind. So we only have one person to actually do a public review on. Everybody else went with the private one-on-one reviews where I just listen to your beats, give you some feedback. And there was actually a couple of you guys that I also contacted just because you guys had some really cool ideas or really cool stuff that I felt like we could collaborate on, maybe get you guys some exposure and some opportunities. So make sure you check your email if you did submit for beat reviews. If you want to submit for the next beat review, check the end of this actual tutorial and you'll have all the info there on where to submit. But without further talking, this actual tutorial is going to be a Travis Scott style tutorial, just something that I was kind of inspired to do by his album. I wanted to keep kind of nice heavy trap vibe, something a little bit different, but I still wanted to be kind of catchy and radio friendly, so you can kind of take this track in a couple different directions. Like I said, I've been in a really good creative space lately, so I have a ton of beats. Last month I probably made the most beats I've ever made since doing beats, probably for the last 10 years or so. So I have a bunch of different tutorials coming up for you guys, random stuff, everything from J. Cole featuring Miguel type stuff to Travis Scott, Kanye West, Nipsey Hussle, Currency, Harry Fraud, Bryson Tiller, and more. Like I said, just a really good creative space, create some really great music stuff that I'm just really excited to start sharing with you guys. So in between our regular series, you'll be seeing me kind of do a lot more of these random little tutorial stuff that we haven't really talked about or that hasn't been requested, but just stuff that I made that's, in my opinion, dope and that I think people can learn from. So look out for that. Without further talking, let's jump to the next section. I should get started on this beat. So before we actually start on the beat, I just want to quickly address a question that we get a lot, and that question is usually, should I start with chords or should I start with a melody and then match my chords to it? And honestly, this is kind of a preference thing. You can do both, obviously, successfully. There's tons of producers out there that have singles and are platinum and, you know, have a ton of placements that probably work on both sides of that spectrum, starting with chords or melodies. But for me personally, I like to start with chords. And the reason I like to start with chords is once I have a cooler chord progression down, it just becomes easier to add stuff on top of that. Usually if I just kind of play a melody without any chords behind it, to me it can kind of be a little bit hard to hear kind of the big picture. But if I have some chords down and then now I can play with my melody off of what the chords are doing, so I can, you know, add little notes in between the chords and do stuff like that, I just find that I get a lot more creative and that I'm able to just create a lot more catchier stuff. So I usually always start with the chords and then move to melodies. Plus sometimes I can just kind of find it difficult to kind of really nail down the timing if I want to add chords to a melody later. So it just always makes sense for me to start with melodies. And the other thing we always have questions about is, should you start with instruments or should you start with drums? Now, for me personally, again, this is a preference thing. There's people who do both, but for me personally, I like to start with instruments, just because if I do a drum pattern, I lay something down, when it comes time to actually do the instrumentation to the track, I always find myself not being as creative as I usually am, because I kind of get caught up in the drum track and just trying to follow exactly what the drums are doing. So the tracks just become kind of really simple and choppy a little bit. But if I'm just kind of playing out whatever I want to play out first and then adding the drums later, I just find myself being a lot more creative with just that metronome and just kind of using that instead of having a full drum track. So that's just kind of my preferences. So I hope that just kind of answers that question. You can really pick either one, but my thoughts are usually just to go with the chords, then the leads or whatever, and then add the drums last. So let's jump to the next section and I'll show you guys the chords that I started this track off. So to start this track off with, I found a patch in OVO The Dynasty Volume 2, which is a preset bank for Silent from www.studiosounds.com. And in this particular bank, I used patch 108 PD Fond Dreams. And it's obviously velocity sensitive, so you can have a much more aggressive sound like this, or you can just play it a little bit with a little bit less velocity and have some a lot smoother. Okay, so I liked just the sound of the more smoother type vibe, just because I wanted this track to be kind of light and airy. Travis Scott obviously has very heavy vocals with all the different layers, pitching down, pitching up, and stuff like that. So I wanted to keep the track pretty open, but still have a melodic twist for him to kind of do his thing. So that was kind of thinking behind this. So the first thing I did was just find a little chord progression I liked. The key I ended up using was C pure minor. So let me lay down these 4 chords and I'll show you guys what they are. Okay, so really simple, and the BPM is set to 125, so this is going to be double time. Shift and D just to even everything out. So the first and the fourth chord are exactly the same. So the first chord is C, D sharp, G. Second chord, excuse me, is F, G sharp, C. Third chord, A sharp, D, F. And then fourth chord obviously repeats from the 1. So these particular chords just had kind of a nice minor feel to them, but they still had a little bit of a melodic twist. And when I think of Travis Scott, or I guess the Travis Scott sound that I love, I always seem to gravitate more towards his stuff that has a nice melodic touch to it. It can be dark or it can be upbeat, but just has that nice melody to it. And I really kind of enjoy the stuff he does with his vocals. So when I actually did this, that was kind of the whole thought of it. I wanted to have something that was nice and airy because he does have powerful vocals, but still had a melody, but was nice and open. So it wasn't just overdone. So these other chords came up with. It kind of gave me a cool little vibe to start off with. And I'm going to go ahead and assign this to a free mixer track. If you listen to it, it's actually a pretty solid kind of big full sound. And I'm going to be adding a bass line and other stuff to this. Actually, I'm going to be adding an 808 to this later on, but I basically don't need this sound to be that thick. So all I'm going to do is just cut a lot of the kind of lower frequencies. And keep in mind that this actual patch is velocity sensitive, so what you were hearing there with all the little varieties sounds cool, but for this particular track I wanted to be a little bit more uniform. So I'm going to go ahead and just even out these velocities approximately into the same kind of spot, just so they all pretty much sound different as far as tone goes. I don't know if I just said different, but I definitely meant I want them to sound the same. So in case I said different, I meant the same. Okay, so like I said, that was just a cool little bass for me to start with. So let's jump to the next section. I'll show you guys what I added to this. So the next thing I did was I just went ahead and cloned Silence again. And this is the same bank again over the Dynasty Volume 2 from Studio Sounds. And the patch that I'm using is 88, the LD Rap Whistle. And with this, I'm basically just going to add a couple notes. I'm basically just going to pick notes out of the chords and just play one note with this lead, just to kind of add a second layer to the chord, almost, with this little tone and this little texture in there. So let's go ahead and add these simple little 4 notes. Okay, so just real simple like that. And we're going to go ahead and just turn these all the way up. Again, just to kind of keep them pretty even. Shift and D, just make sure they're all the same size. And as you can see, so the first chord, you can see the little ghost channels, basically where these notes came from. So you have the C, which is the root note for the first chord. Then you have the G sharp, the second note in the second chord. Then we have the D note, which plays over here on the third chord. And then fourth chord, you have your D sharp, which obviously plays on the 1 and in the second, in this last chord right here. And then just repeat. So real simple, just adds a nice little kind of touch to it. And we're going to go ahead and assign a free mix track to this as well. And we want to just kind of get rid of a little bit of that low end, just because we don't want it to be quite as kind of full sounding again. Okay, so just by adding that quick little touch and quick little layer, it just kind of really changes the tone of this track. It makes it much more playful sounding, and just takes that kind of dark sound, in my opinion, kind of creates a little bit more of a playful, happy type vibe to it, which sounded really good to me. And obviously that would kind of play well on the new album that Travis did, just because there was a lot of experimentation on there. So that sound just really worked for me. So let's jump to the next section. I'll show you guys what I added next. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put pattern 1 into my playlist and just start kind of arranging my track already. So this will be kind of start off as the intro. So on pattern 2, we're going to add just a simple little tom. And this is the Tom 50's High from a pack that we have coming out, which is just kind of a drum kit that takes the regular, 808 kit that everybody knows and loves and throws kind of a twist on it. So you have all your kind of classic sounds that you're used to, but plus you have a bunch of different variations of it. So this is from that kit. This actual particular sound isn't really altered much, just a regular Tom. But basically, I'm going to just lay in a couple notes with this. But before I do that, I'm going to open up BITTSM on my mixer. So just add it to a mixer track. And I'm just going to go ahead and drag this Tom over into here. Then I'm going to go to this little flag type icon or whatever that's supposed to be. And I'm going to go ahead and click Detect Pitch Regions and see what the actual note is. So it's telling me it's a G sharp. We're going to come into our envelope and instrument settings, and we're going to find G sharp. We're going to right click over G sharp. So now that we've done that, we know that every key that we play on our MIDI keyboard is going to be the actual correct note. So when we play C, it's actually going to play C, and that just allows us to basically play this like an instrument. So we can get a little bit more creative with our percussion versus just kind of throwing stuff in there and not knowing what key it is and just kind of doing stuff by ear, which works sometimes. But this is just a quicker way if you want to actually just play stuff with your MIDI keyboard and just know that you're hitting the right notes. So what we're going to do is we're going to go in here and we're going to basically add just a real simple pattern. Let's go ahead and just make this slightly bigger, and we're going to basically add this C right here, but we're going to actually do it slightly higher. So we'll basically just do something like this. Okay, so something like that, just so it has a little bit of a quicker groove. And then we'll basically do a same thing, but just kind of go with octave lower, just kind of switch it up a little bit, and then just play that C again over here. So we have something like this. Okay, so just a simple little percussion sound, and we're going to assign a free mixer track. So just to give it a little bit more movement, make it a little bit more interesting, we're going to go ahead and apply a fruity delay. So make sure that you have your feedback set to ping pong, you have your panning to the left or to the right, just so it'll bounce from speaker to speaker. And we're just going to turn our volume down and then set our time to probably either 2 or 4. Let's try 2 and just see how that sounds. Okay, 2 actually doesn't sound bad. Just make sure you turn the volume down just so it's not too distracting. And then we're also going to just add a reverb to this, just to make it slightly bigger. So the first thing we're going to do is just turn our decay up. The sound isn't obviously doing a ton, so we can have a little bit of overlap and a little bit of a tail end on the reverb, just to make it bigger, make it stand out. And in kind of these empty style tracks, you're going to really rely a lot on different effects and stuff just to keep stuff interesting. So everything is kind of open and stuff is easier to notice. So you want to just kind of make sure that when you're doing stuff like this, you take a little bit more time on the effects and just make sure that stuff is kind of somewhat interesting to listen to, even though it's simple. So we're going to, like I said, make this a little bit of a bigger sound. So let's go ahead and play it real quick. Okay, and then we're just going to go in here, since this is somewhat of a percussive element, obviously, even though we're kind of playing it like an instrument. I do want to play with the quantize on it, just so it's not strictly on the grid, and we can use this to kind of build the bounce for the track. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit Alt and Q on our computer keyboards, and that's going to bring up the little piano roll quantizer. And this is obviously for my last project, but for this particular one, we're going to go ahead and pick MPC2 and accept. So just going to move it slightly off the grid, just so we can get a little bit of a more of a groove in it, which like this obviously is not really going to be that much that noticeable, excuse me, but as you add more elements and stuff like that, and they all have that little bit of a swing, it does become a little bit more apparent. At first, when I started using it, I could never notice it. It was more like a precautionary type thing, but after using it probably, I would say, like a week or so, now I can definitely tell when it's not there. So just something you kind of pick up as you use. Okay, so just a really tiny sound, but in my opinion, it just gives this track a really cool feel and a really cool bounce already. So it's always kind of impressive how the small changes can really kind of be the big differences in the track, and we tend to overproduce stuff. But sometimes try the simple solution first, and if it works, don't even go further from there. Just keep it, because we as producers, we constantly want to add, but sometimes it's just a simple thing. So try the simple method first. If that sounds good, leave it. Move on to the next thing. Finish the track. But anyway, so that's what I did for this. Let's jump in the next section. Continue.